Hey guys, Professor Bill, Comic Book University, and Hellions, issue number 2. After I tell you about who made this comic book, I'm going to tell you about how this somehow became my favorite comic book in the Dawn of X series. Just with this issue alone, it helps the first issue too, but holy crap, let's get started on this. So, Zeb Wells is the writer, Stefan Segovia on art, color art by David Curiel and VC's Corey Petit doing the letters, Tom Mueller on design, Steven Segovia, and Rain Barretto doing the cover art with Butch Juice and Rachel Rosenberg doing the variant. Production by Nick Russell, and Jonathan Hickman is the head of X. This issue is called Blood Work. There's also mention of idle hands in here. Yeah, the devil finds use for idle hands. This is a saying, and it's actually a really good saying, where it basically indicates you have to be doing something, otherwise you're going to wind up doing, you have to try and do something productive, otherwise you're going to wind up doing something bad. Yes, this is true, and that really does encompass what this comic book is all about. Scalp Hunter, for me, that's the main character in this, despite everybody else. Scalp Hunter is the main guy in here. This whole team goes to demolish Sinister's old orphanage, where Scott and Alex, who's on this team also, Havoc, they used to be wards of the state, wards of the orphanage. Anyhow, where all sorts of bad things were done, by the way, and I believe that's also where Madeline Pryor was created. Hey, turns out that Maddie is here. Now, I don't know if it's... I feel like Sinister knew that Maddie was here, but he definitely knew that the rest of the Marauders were here. So that is freaky. At the same time, make sure that you read the text boxes, the white pages, because guess what? It turns out that Mr. Sinister has been talking about doing a kind of like a psych eval, but a psionic psych eval on Scalp Hunter specifically, Grey Crow, because he's repressing natural feelings, the feelings of concern for teammates, even though they might not have been the best teammates. The fact is, these are his brothers and sisters. These are the people who he knows the best. So it makes sense that he would show at least some concern, but he can't even show that. He can't even demonstrate that. He can't openly and consciously acknowledge that. So it's troubling. So I wonder if he didn't do this purposely just so that he could try and confront his demons. That would fit in the psychology, if we can even call it that, of Mr. Sinister. There are several parts in here that just go perfectly with the way that comics have been established, again, in the Jim Shooter era. I know, like, everything that I do is just about how perfect the Jim Shooter era in Marvel was, right? But allow me to explain not only the tenets thereof, but why it worked. So in here, Wild Child, he's looking for who the Alpha is. Now, we should already know who Wild Child is if we've been reading Alpha Flight comic books and some X-Men comic books, Age of Apocalypse, all that good stuff. But it's established in here, just in case you don't know who this character is, you don't know anything about him. It's been established in the beginning of this comic book, not even in preamble, just in a very quick 2-panel moment where he goes after the Alpha of a particular pack. That being the case, later on, that comes into play again. Here's the setup. This thing happened, Chekhov's gun, and then later on it comes back into play again. That's going to be resolved in the next issue. Permanently? Probably not. I hope that we continue seeing something along these lines, but I don't want it to be overdone. But it was effing perfection here, because just when it seems like all is lost, it turns out... not really the case. It really can get worse. That's terrifying. That's a terrifying thought. But unfortunately, it's a reality. Here and in life sometimes, it's just the reality. It really can get worse. So don't get too down on yourself. Save some. Save some, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So that happens. Also, the idea of consequence happens in this comic book. First off, Empath being a jerk. Now, Nightcrawler says something in the beginning of this. He's not in the book, but there's the little thing in the beginning, the very beginning, somebody has to say something. It's Nightcrawler. He's going to say something. And he says, "Those whose violence you do not understand often have seen horrors you cannot imagine." Yeah. As a guy who knows a lot of Vietnam vets, and I have known World War II vets, all the World War II vets that I knew are gone now, and God rest their souls. But I've heard horror stories, and Vietnam specifically was a very interesting one. Quite a few of the guys I know that were in Vietnam are not the kind who would talk to me about what happened in Vietnam, but you can tell in their actions. You go and hang out with them, somebody decides to start a little bit of trouble. They don't want to fight you, but you want to fight them. Guess what happens? You don't always... There are many people who will be upset at the results of their actions. They'll be very upset about the way that someone reacts to your actions, but you don't get to determine someone's reaction. You get to determine your action. You get to determine the way that you are. And if you push things to the very edge with some people, don't be too surprised when all of a sudden they bite your freaking face off. So in this particular case, Empath did that. And... well, we'll see Empath again one of these days once he's cloned. I'm saying, and I thought that was a freaking amazing part in this comic book. I'm like, nobody deserves it better. I don't want to hear about mental illness and this, that, and the other thing. Because you know what? Every single member of that team is dealing with something to that effect, including the leader, Psylocke. Yeah. Nanny and Orphan-Maker really made, especially Nanny, made for a lot of humor in this book, which was very necessary. This is just script writing 101. When you have a theme this goddamn dark, you really need to have some humor someplace. So I understand why, if maybe Nanny doesn't seem like the perfect fit on this team, no, she's a very necessary fit. You have to have something that's going to, even if it didn't make you laugh when you're reading this comic book, it didn't keep pushing you down to a dark place. It's like it pulled you back a little bit. And it let you kind of, you know, okay, I can see the bigger picture here instead of like 7 blind men around the elephant, right? So I really dug on that a lot. Later on in this book, when you suddenly see who's here, and of course the white page has to come at the same time. Oh man, Maddie Pryor, the hot babe who made undercleavage beautiful, underboob beautiful, long before it was ever in style. She was so way ahead of her time, it's almost ridiculous. Let me tell you something. Give me a second. How you doing? All right, I'm back. So anyway, there are really dark things afoot here. I am not sure entirely what everything is, but do not forget... oh, wait, I can actually show you a really cool image that happens in here prior to this, and that is right when Havoc is walking in. He's seeing all this weird stuff right here. Look at this. He sees in there Maddie with him. So this is reminiscent of X-Men Blue, which just happened technically 2 series ago. So I'm digging on this so much, man. Wow. And then later on when you see all the Marauders come in and whatnot, yeah. Yeah, big time. So I'm not going to go into the consequence. God, this was just, like the ending of this was just so freaking shocking. Like, it can't get worse, can it? Yeah, it can. The consequences of your actions are important. And again, this is a Jim Shooter thing. To Chris Claremont, we're talking about X-Men books here, right? To Chris Claremont, he did not like the idea that Jim Shooter said, oh, you just had Phoenix kill an entire planet with, full of people. There's got to be consequences for that. He hated the idea that he was told there have to be consequences for this. But look at how great the stories are that we've gotten to this day from that. Likewise, you're going to see things that happen in this book that are the results of consequences of things that happened in the past, including the Mutant Massacre, including things from X-Men Blue, including things from all in between. Following the history of all these characters, Zeb Wells understands these characters. I don't know that he handpicked these characters, but he definitely did his research on them. I feel like he's got a psych profile on each one of them on his wall when he starts writing in his office. Because holy crap, this is delivered with such clarity, with such expertise. I need to know from people who don't know the history of some of these characters, were you able to follow along just fine? Because I feel like you should be able to. Although maybe you might be curious as to who Madeline Pryor is, because they didn't give an explanation to her as much as I think that they should have, white pages included. But all that being said, This comic book was deep. It brought out some deep cuts, man. Holy crap. And I was thoroughly impressed by how good this was. Guys, I'm going to finish up on that. I'm going to ask you to do two things for me. If you felt like you enjoyed this video, turn your phone sideways, tap that like button. And if you feel like I should, you should give back to what I've given, just a request, allow a video to play, allow an ad to play all the way through its to completion if an ad does play at the end of this video. That's all I'm asking. This is the only way that your favorite YouTubers get paid. I do also want to give a special thank you to my Patreon community. That is technically a different way that we can all get paid. But anyway, I understand not everybody can be a patron, but if you can't afford to be a patron, it's cool. Can you afford to give me a couple of minutes, a minute, whatever it takes to allow an ad to play, even if it means opening up a new window and watching your next video there. Anyway, guys, that's it. I'm done proselytizing. I'm out. Shameless self-promotion. Guys, Professor Bill, Comic Book University. Class dismissed.